Hi and welcome. In this series, I'll take a look at some notes and expand on Michel Makarius' book titled Ruins. I'm going to be taking a look at Chapter 7. This section is titled At the Crossroads and focuses on an umbrella of ideas tied to ruins and travel, mostly in the 18th and 19th centuries. We're going to focus on two areas mostly, the city of Pompeii and ruins sprinkled throughout Egypt. Our starting point is going to be with Pompeii. I just want to add a bit of context for Pompeii and its surrounding region. Pompeii was an ancient city located near Naples in the Campania region of Italy, along with other neighboring sites such as Herculaneum and Boscreale. I don't know if I pronounced that right. The city of Pompeii was buried under 4 to 6 meters, or roughly 13 to 20 feet, of volcanic ash and pumice after an eruption from the volcano Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Largely preserved under the ash, the excavated city offered a unique snapshot of Roman life that was frozen at the moment it was buried, and an extraordinarily detailed insight into everyday life of its inhabitants. It was a wealthy town, enjoying many fine public buildings and luxurious private houses with lavish decorations, furnishings, and works of art, which were the main attractions for early excavators. As a side note, organic remains, including wooden objects and human bodies, were entombed in the ash. Over time, they decayed, leaving voids which archaeologists found could be used as molds in making plaster casts of the figures in their final moments of life. Also, the numerous graffiti carved on the walls and inside rooms provide a wealth of examples of the largely lost vulgar Latin spoken colloquially at the time, contrasting with the former language of the classical writers. Today, Pompeii is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Italy, with approximately 2.5 million visitors annually. The main ongoing theory is that most inhabitants in Pompeii were able to escape the two-day eruption because only 1,150 bodies or so have been found on site so far. Bodies that were found seemed poised to leave the city as well, because they were often found with valuable items such as jewelry and coins. A surprising but gruesome note here, but it's believed that most people died instantly from exposure to high heat rather than suffocation from ash. This is because a study published in 2010 showed that exposure to at least 250 degrees Celsius or 480 degrees Fahrenheit of hot pyroclastic flows at a distance of 10 kilometers or around 6 miles from the volcano's vent was enough to cause instant death, even if people were sheltered in buildings. So a pyroclastic flow, those are fast-moving currents of hot gas and volcanic matter that flow along the ground at high velocities, averaging around 62 miles per hour, but are capable of reaching speeds as fast as 430 miles per hour. That's pretty scary. So, why did this matter in the 18th and 19th centuries? Why did people care about Pompeii? A lot of major excavations and scientific discovery of the site were established in the 18th century. During this time, Pompeii was also used as part of the Grand Tour, which was an educational journey, mostly to Italy, by groups of usually young, upper-class European men to witness first-hand knowledge that was previously read in books. Pompeii also became a site frequented by groups of artists as well. It's important to note that in the arts, the city brought out a sort of ghostly imagination. It was sort of like a source of spectral visions. Pompeii inspired a wide variety of other intellectuals as well, including notable figures such as psychologist Sigmund Freud. There's a paragraph on page 156 that's pretty great and focuses on Freud. It reads as such. Once more, the buried city had inspired a writer. Wilhelm Jensen would probably have fallen into oblivion had Freud not unearthed and interpreted his work. Freud's famous essay, Delirium and Dreams in Jensen's Gradiva, translates a literary text subtitled A Pompeian Fantasy into analytical symptoms. Rather than embark here on our own interpretation of Freud's interpretation, let us just note a strange correspondence that makes Gradiva a sister of Gautier's Aria Marcella. As before, the story originates in a fragment of a female body, in the latter the mold of a breast, in the former cast of a foot. And like Octave, Jensen's hero, Hanold, also stumbles among the ruins of Pompeii in a dazed state of mind. Of course, it was utter madness to believe that a Pompeian buried by Vesuvius 2 millennia ago could periodically come back to life, walk, speak, draw, and eat bread. But when a belief makes you feel happy, it can also make you swallow a farrago of impossibilities of every kind. That the merciless midday sun, rather than the uncanny glimmers of moonshine, serve to induce mental derangement, makes a little difference. For Gautier, as for Jensen, the city is resurrected through its eroticization in the form of a woman in a dream, a breath of desire, and Pompeii is born again from its ashes. A sort of exciting note for Freud and his interest in Pompeii, and also for Jensen here, along with archaeology and the unconscious, it's a lot of stuff all in one, is that he actually had a plaster replica of the bas-relief Gradiva in his study, among other copies of objects. So this was a Pompeii, and this carving of this woman were objects of fascination. For here, I'm going to move towards Egypt, the French, and photography. The development of photography here in the 1800s was important in terms of establishing new relationships to travel, representation, and at times memory. Some big points of emphasis at this time came to the ruined monument and a strong desire for new exotic experiences. These desires and social positionings were proliferating at the same time as travelers moved eastward. And around the same time, photography experienced a type of innovation that greatly democratized its utilization. Napoleon Bonaparte's travels to Egypt in 1798 constituted a major point of inflection for the French, along with a major deciphering of hieroglyphics in 1822 by a French scholar, the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 with a strong French presence, and the erection of the Luxor obelisk in 1836 in France. The French were obsessed in many ways with Egypt. The French would often deploy archaeological missions in Egypt, and during these expeditions, the group was almost always accompanied by a photographer. The main type of photography I'm going to focus on here is called a daguerreotype. It was the first publicly available photographic process and was widely used during the 1840s and 50s. The process was invented by Louis-Jacques Mandet Daguerre and was introduced in 1839. As a process, it was a bit pricey to produce images from. To start, a person would polish a sheet of silver-plated copper to a mere finish, then treat the surface with fumes that made that made the surface light sensitive and finally exposed the plate in a camera. The images on these plates are then essentially transferred onto paper. All of this without making any mistakes, obviously. I'm not going to go any deeper into the process as we need to move on a bit. The first photographer to go to Egypt was Frederick Goupil-Fesquet. Not sure if I pronounced that properly. But he was only the first of many, many other people. Egypt very quickly became a, quote, must-see site in the 19th century evolution of the Grand Tour as well. So along with people who want to move eastward, it was also used as a site for educational experience for wealthy people. Something really important to remember here is that during this time period, ideological sensibilities such as Romanticism were still quite common. A good example of this is in Gustave Flaubert's journal, now published as Voyage in Egypt, which documented his travels with the photographer Maxime Duchamp in 1849 to 51. Although they both received government-assigned appointments to study in Egypt, Flaubert through the Ministry of Agriculture and Trade, and Duchamp through the Ministry of Education, in Flaubert's journal, there's a strong sense that their mission was also a good excuse to travel. This is seen in the text through sensibilities and motivations that are more aligned with Romanticism and less with a job. There's this sort of nostalgic longing for the promise of something aesthetically and emotionally new by observing vanished civilizations. Essentially, what they were searching for was something exotic by traveling east and searching for the quote-unquote Orient. On page 160, there's a great definition of this. It reads as such. This is the salient difference between Grand Tour and Voyage to the East. During the Enlightenment, the point was to corroborate book knowledge in situ. In the 19th century, traveling meant leaving for elsewhere so as to experience new feelings to benefit from disorientation. Thus, in complete contrast to the archaeologist, architect, or scientist, the romantic traveler may gaze on the ruins before him with an inattentive eye. Going back to the photographs themselves, during this time period, the process itself was very technical. A single shot for a photograph required around 45 minutes of work time with at least a 2-minute exposure of the plate, and that's just for one photograph. The end result was a realistic representation on grainy paper with a distinct sepia tone. But again, this is without any mistakes made during the initial production of the plates and also of the prints themselves. On page 164, there's a few sentences about this that I thought were fantastic. They read as such. Thus, the image of the ageless remains of Egypt rendered the essential constituent of early photography more tangible. Time, too, is distilled onto its plates. The sense of remoteness, the quality of silence that emanates from the pictures of the Nile Valley in this period does not stem from the places depicted alone, but also from the mineral texture of the printing. Chunks of stone, fragments of columns, limbs of statues appear buried in the sand, as in the depths of time whence they have been summoned. Well, that's it for the 7th section of Makarius' book Ruins. If you like this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.